Welcome everyone to this conversation. I'm very happy to be in conversation this afternoon with artist Carlos Estévez. Probably you know me from previous conversations because my name is Meyken Barreto. I've been here in conversation with some of the Cuban artists throughout the year 2021. And this is the conversation to in a way finish the year, and I'm very happy to be doing this with Carlos Estévez, which, as you may know, it's a very important artist. Carlos has an extensive trajectory as a visual artist. He has many grants and prizes, artist residencies, and of course a lot of solo and group exhibitions as well. So thank you, Carlos, for being here today. I'm glad to be in conversation with you about your residency at RU. And can you hear me? Are you?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly.
Okay, because the connection is a little bit.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending to this conversation. Thank you, Meyken, for doing the question and conducting this conversation. I also want to acknowledge all the people that have been involved. I'm very grateful of being here in this incredible residency. I want to thank Ben Rodriguez from the Rockefeller Brothers, Carlos Pomares from the Cuban Art Fund, Natalia Angles from Residency on Limit, Marian, Lulu, Mariko, Silvia, and all the curators that I've been meeting, the incredible artists that I've been meeting. And it's been a wonderful experience for me. And as I forget a name, I know there's too many people involved, but it's a wonderful team and has been a pleasure being here. So seeing we can start a conversation now.
Yeah, so just let's start by talking about your work here in these few weeks that you have been in New York, because I know you have developed a whole new series of works related to your experience with the city, with New York City, and you exhibit those works last Saturday as part of your open studio. So I'm going to share my screen because I have some of these images of the works that you have been producing here in New York. And I want to ask you about the ideas behind this series and give us some context about this new series of works. Let me share my screen first so we can start talking about it. Yeah, so as I was saying, this is, I mean, I'm going to show some images of this new series, Symbiotic City, that you produced in these few weeks while you have been here in residency in New York. So I want to ask you about the reasoning behind this, the ideas about this new series.
Okay, well, I want to start saying that for me, Artist in Residency program has been a very important experience in my career as a fuel of my creative process. So I've been doing Artist in Residence since the 90s. I see my first one was in Mexico City in 1997. But this one has been very, very special. My creative process changed completely when I left Cuba. Because while I was in Cuba, I tried to do the best of what I have. When I left, there was an open door, and you have too many possibilities to acquire supplies. And so I changed of doing from what I have, working especially in my specific ideas, and try to make them come true. It's in a conversation with the place, and especially here in New York, what attract me most was architecture. As a matter of fact, I wanted to do two body of work, one based on architecture and one based on people, on pedestrians. I think they're pretty much building like a high-end creatures, and they contain a lot of people. Cities are alive. They move, they change during the season, they change during the day with the light, but also they change with the human energy. So I was attracted to use this concept of symbiotic or symbiosis.
Let me show you some of these images. So this is how it looked after all the work that Carlos have been doing in the residency. And you can see how he has created these fascinating and imaginative interpretations of different cities, or different buildings, I'm sorry, in the city. So when I was talking to him about this idea of that he creates a new series of works every time he had an artistic residency, he also mentions that he kind of he has kept all this work with him because he wants to at some point exhibit all these works that he have been doing in relation to the specific context of each artistic residency he has done in the past. And there are many of them. If we go to his website and check his curriculum, you see all the different residencies that he has done in different parts of the world. I'm going to show you this image. Reinos Compartidos is probably the image that best summarizes this idea of Carlos of dressing architecture, but in a way looking at architecture as something that is very much connected with the human being. I've collected a few images of the works of Carlos dealing with this symbol of the marionettes. And as you may know, his works very much informed by philosophy and by transcendental ideas. So I was already talking a little bit about this next question that I have for you, that has to do with the importance and the use and the presence of architecture in your practice. And I wanted to ask you about it, because I feel like this architecture is there, but as part of a bigger picture, that it's always centered on the human being or the human figure. And I remember this work, Reinos Compartidos, or Shared Kingdoms, that that you created in 2006, and it's an interesting image because it kind of mixes or summarizes that idea that the architecture in your work is related with the human being in a way. So I want you to talk a little bit about it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. My interest in architecture is purely symbolic. I think architect is a metaphor of human beings, because every architecture is a creation. It was in somebody's mind, in somebody's need. So I use it in a very symbolic way. Also, I'm very interested in alchemy. And for the alchemist, the house is a metaphor of the body and the container of the soul. So that's why I think every building have an identity and have an expression. It's like living among living entities. So the whole city is alive and buildings talk. And what I'm trying to do with architecture is just listen to that conversation and connect to them and try to follow, and it's like an exchange of experience. Also, making architectural drawings somehow is a way to get into the architect's mind, how they solve design problems, human problems. And also, there is a lot of information in the architecture about the history of the city, how the city grew. When you see all the proportion of the building, you can see different layer of history, and how the spirit of solving issues such as how to preserve the old and how to adapt it to the new technique of construction, how integrate each other, and somehow all this question and phenomenon is fascinating to me.
Yeah, I kind of perceive that idea of the architecture not being just something like artificial and cold and created, but its connection with like sort of the affective, like an affective sort of space, and how that it's in a way reflecting the human figure. Yeah, and specifically talking about human figures, I also had this idea. I've been collecting some images where you use this icon, this sort of symbol that you have used throughout your work, which is the marionettes. And at some I read something that Carol Damian, this art historian and curator that have extensively studied your work, she points to this symbol as something important in your language, in your narratives. So I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you about the role of marionettes, about how and why are you using this icon in your work?
Well, I think the main subject of my work is the human existence. I'm very interested in the human spiritual universe and try to figure out what we have inside. It always fascinates me how we recognize each other in a physiognomy, but every human is different. And how rich is the human life experience that is based on some specific patterns that work the same all the time: love, hate, work, fight, happiness, sadness, but it manifests all different in many different ways. So that's why the human body in a period of my life, of my career, was the center of all my research. And I think at some point I was metaphorically like going into microscope, going inside each time. And that's why I am more projected on what is going on inside. And the figure is probably in another level, but I think metaphorically is present in there. It's just in different way or different approach.
Yeah, I see. I noticed that this is very much present as part of this research that you do, this narrative that you recreate in your work. So let's talk a little bit about another aspect of your practice, because you are a very diverse and versatile artist. You not only create drawings and paintings, but you also work with installations and sculptures, and also assemblages. So this is a project that you are working on, I think, right now, and we can see how you connect here with the material culture, how you reuse and mix and transform these objects from the everyday life. So I'm very curious about that process where you leave the canvas or you leave the paper and you focus on objects. I want to ask you a little bit about that process, how it all started, like this interest in everyday objects and these ideas of bringing them to your work.
I think that's coming first. It's a cultural thing. I think for being Cuban, I've been born in Cuba, where you have to keep your objects from generation to generations, and everybody have different things. And also you have to fix your objects. You have a bicycle, you have to take care of your bicycle. You have to know how the bicycle works. If you have a table, you have to fix it. So you create a relation of feeling with your belonging. And at some point, you really believe that the world around you have its own life. So that's, I think, it's my approach to objects. It's like try to see the energy or the life behind everything. From that point, I've been working since I was in Cuba with material were very important to me, like wood or because I think you express idea very differently. You say different things with different materials. So I like to switch from one medium to another because sometimes you say completely different things, or you change the tone of what you say, or you also discover a different path of your creation. So I like to switch from painting to drawing to installation to this year I did a collaboration with some video animators. They use my work and they create a sort of movie for projection. That was a artwork at the in Coral Gable, part of that project Illuminates. So I also like to do the installations, and it's also an encounter with the material, with reality. And that word that I'm working on it now is called Encounter of the Souls, and how it's about how everything has it's like a part of the human universe. Every gravitates around each other, objects, people. Every object contains a lot of human information. It contains a human need, a human dream. It was created by somebody. It was used by somebody, and the object that survived, how they met each other. So I'm fascinated about all these histories or stories that objects generate. Yeah, that's pretty much how I work.
Is this work still in progress, or you finished this piece already?
That piece is in progress because when I do artwork, it's like an experience that ends, but I have a new beginning. So that piece, that word is coming from other pieces that I started to play with the idea of drawers and doors that have things, objects inside. So that piece is pretty much finished, but it has some notebooks. I'm doing a diary of my dreams. It's some exercise that I started to practice with for that piece specifically. And I found it very interesting because in your dreams, you meet people that you know, people that are already dead, people that doesn't exist or probably exist but you don't know. So it's fascinating, the world of dreams. So because the piece is about encounters, you encounter things in your dreams as well. So I'm doing this diary to put in the drawer. So the piece is a cabinet. It's a cabinet, a container of objects coming from different sources, and they meet in my cabinet. So I'm creating like a meeting place for them to meet.
Okay, so you mean that these drawers up here, they are full of stuff as well, with these notebooks with your dreams?
Yeah, they're gonna have different things. They have objects. They have flowers from my friends' gardens. They have a notebook with my dreams. So it's like a compound of encounters. I'm doing like a compilation of memories and place it on that cabinet. And beside there is the other visible object that I don't know where they come from, where they belong, but obviously if they exist, it was belong to somebody. So they have implicit story on it.
Yeah, I see. So it's not a work about yourself, but it's a work about many people, many presences, and many times, I could say, because I see there are a lot of also photographies with other identities, other people from other periods also here as well.
Yeah, I just try to connect objects and make it work in that cabinet that I built.
Mm-hmm. So, how you envision that the public deals with this piece? You want them to open the drawers, or you want them to figure out what it's in there, or imagine what it's in there?
Well, yeah, I think they can be used as when I did one piece in Havana that is in the Fine Art Museum, the real universal history, which is a toy with a lot of dogs. And then that was a participation piece. So I like the idea that people can also be part of that encounter. When you see an artwork, I think you not only validate the artwork, you are part of the artwork and you are part of the experience. So you are connecting with the artist somehow, and you are making your own experience with the artist artwork. So yes, I think it would be interesting that people can interact with the piece. Also, the piece is sort of a toy because it have numbers and words, and it's a sort of poetry that you can make, choosing your the door that you want to open and find out what is inside. So I like that. I like that the pieces, the artwork is something alive, and it get energy with somebody is interacting with it.
Yeah, it's like discovering this new world where souls are knowing each other, right? That's interesting because it's also a work that summarizes this also sort of idea that is in your practice, that you are kind of recreating a universe according to your understanding of the world. And you also, I remember you also create this other work. Let me show it if I can. My computer is now I don't. Okay, good. This other project that I think you created for another residency or a specific place. Tell us a little bit about this piece.
Well, tell me what it is because right now I'm
Oh yeah,
blind.
it's es como el papalote.
Okay. That was a project I did in for San Francisco, the art kiosk with the same curator, Lang Fong, who curate the Illuminator Gable. So they invite me to create a specific side piece for this a square in San Francisco, which is a very little architectural like vitrine. And I used to make kite with when I was a kid, so I love to continue that practice and I more in professional way because I think it's very symbolic, very metaphoric, the kites, because you put something from yourself in an object and you put it on the sky. So it's a sort of going out of yourself and look at you from above and look at you above in the sky. And so I did that. That is a big installation made out of bamboos and collage, and the propeller it moves. So I also want to experiment into motion. So when the wind comes, and it was very light, suspended from the ceiling. So when the wind came, it moved the propellers and it moved the whole kite. And yeah, that was the title is Flying Dreams. And that was the installation. Also, when I was installing the piece, it was a train passing by close, and I also want to explore into the sound. So probably the next kite that I will make, it will have sound as well.
I see. So we have kind of explored different aspects of your practice and different also subjects in your work. But in general, I feel like there's a lot of philosophical ideas behind it, and I know these this author, Jorge Gracia, has also write a lot about your work in connection with philosophy. But I want to ask you about it, because I read as part of your statement that somehow philosophy inform your work, but it's not a direct relation. It's not something like an obvious relation. So I want to ask you about it. What do you read in terms of philosophy, and how do you feel that this knowledge it's informing your work?
Well, among all the sources of inspiration, for me, philosopher is probably the most important because it is the art of thinking. And for me, the most fascinating aspect of humans are the way that everyone thinks individually. And philosophy has been a subject that explored that theme during the history of humankind. So every stage, every period of history is recorded somehow by why the people, what the human were questioning at that time. So I'm very interested in reading how the philosopher elaborate a question, how they try to solve. I think life is an eternal question. It is always going to be things to ask, and because time change and the dynamic of relationship between people and the universe is always different. So that's, I think, the main interest in my work. It's always a philosophical question in every specific drawing or sculpture or installation or wherever it be the artwork. It's like a one meditation, one reflection, and that's what I'm trying to explore.
Yeah, I was reading in your statement that you read a lot of philosophy, but and somehow from time to time you feel like some of these readings are coming into your work in a way or another. But there's also always this questioning about the human existence, about the universe, and all of that. And I think that's pretty much visible in your work. How you have developed this unique universe of symbols and icons and a specific language and the whole narrative around existence, where we see, as we were saying at the beginning, the role of architecture as something also in connection with the humans, and some other symbols and the idea of the universe and how that it's also present in your work. So I am very curious to know if someone from the audience has a question for Carlos. It doesn't have to be about this work. It can be about the new series that he developed and that we talked about earlier. Any question, anything you want to know more about his work? No? So Carlos, do you have any upcoming project this year? Anything you can share with us about your upcoming works or projects?
I want to say that this all this work that I produce in artists in residency are a specific work made in those experience, but also they are the beginning of new projects because, for instance, this architectural body of work that I'm doing here, I'm planning to make it in 3D. And also I did a project in Paris with lampposts, and I'm gonna build also the lamppost, the real design of my lamppost. Yeah, so this is like a continuation that it happened from one body of work give me a new body of work. And specifically your question about my project, I think I'm gonna do, right now I have a show at the O'Keeffe Museum showing my ceramics from another artist in residency I did in 2016 at the McCall Center for the Art and Innovation in Charlotte, North Carolina. I did like a 300 ceramic pieces, and now they are on show and at the O'Keeffe, and they buy me to do a new pieces. They have an incredible facility for ceramic, and that was something that I never explored in my career, and it was so interesting. And so I get into the process, and somehow I think art is like a course. It's not a blessing. When you are in, it becomes part of your life, and it's very demanding. So you have to be creating all the time. So I'm gonna do another residency in that O'Keeffe Museum in Mississippi. I'm gonna do the ceramic, and I'm gonna do a show at the Pan American Art Project in the new space in the Design District in Miami, where I'm gonna show all the shadow boxes and a tarot card that I've been developing during the pandemic, which is a very interactive piece where people can do their own reading based on a constellation on the wall. It's a little bit complex to explain, but people will be able to see it on the spring this coming year at the Pan American Art Project.
Oh, that's great. A lot of things, a lot of new things. That's great. So I think
sorry,
there's
Meyken,
a question. Yeah.
We have somebody raised a hand in the participant, and John,
Yes.
do you have a question?
Yes, I wasn't clear in the introduction. Is Carlos going back and forth between residencies in Cuba, or is he permanently outside of Cuba at this point?
Yeah, I left Cuba in 2003. I went to live in Paris for a residency for a year round, and I never went back. So
Never been back. Okay.
I'm based in Miami, and I'm doing my residency. I have my studio in Miami, so I'm still based in Miami, but I do artist in residency from time to time, maybe 1 or 2 a year.
Okay, thank you. I just was a little confused. I appreciate that.
All right.
Is there any other question? So Carlos, tell me, are you gonna stay a few more days in the studio? Just curious about those people who couldn't make it on Saturday, if they can come.
Yeah, I'm gonna be working until the end of this year. At some point, I have to pack my stuff and send it back to Miami. But if somebody wanna pay me a visit, I will be here pretty much every day, from Monday to Monday, and working. So it would be my pleasure if somebody wanna come by and see what I'm doing and have a conversation, or yeah. So I'm gonna be here a couple of weeks more. Today is 21 now. 10 days more. Yeah. So everybody's welcome to come.
Perfect. That's great. So if you haven't visited the studio, please come by and check these works that are just the most recent series by Carlos, and they're going to be, I mean, there for a few more days if you are around. And thank you everyone for joining this afternoon for the conversation. And
Meyken.
Thank you, Carlos.
No, thank you, Meyken, for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Meyken.
Hello. Yes.
Hi, Carlos. Jorge over here.
Oh, hi,
hi.
Jorge. Do you have a question for Carlos?
No, it's not a question. It's just I want to say thank you, Carlos, because it's a wonderful job you have been doing, and for you as well, Meyken, for the interview. And I hope to see you in the studio next couple days. I'll call you,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's amazing. I've been watching this and seeing the work that you have been doing. It's amazing, my friend. So
Well,
congratulations.
Thank you. You're very welcome to come, and thank you everybody for your patience and for listening to the conversation. Thank you, Meyken, for conducting this conversation. And again, I'm sorry for the technical issues, but we made it.
Yeah, we finally solved it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Carlos. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.